Have you ever wondered how fast a single moment can ruin your entire life? Not over years, not through a long chain of mistakes, but instantly because of one wrong choice, one step too far, one question answered when you should have stayed silent. Before we begin tonight, I just want to say, I'm glad you're here. I hope wherever you are right now, you're warm, you're safe, and you feel just a little bit more grounded than the people you're about to hear about. Maybe you've had a long day. Maybe sleep hasn't come easy lately. Or maybe you're like me, someone who listens to stories like these not to feel scared, but to feel seen, to feel warned. Tonight, I'll share 8 true horror stories. 8 people who didn't break the rules, didn't summon demons, didn't do anything particularly evil. What they did was simple. They said yes when they should have said no, looked when they were told not to, answered when silence would have saved them. These stories aren't about monsters in closets or witches in the woods. They're about decisions, and how fragile the line between safe and sorry really is. So take a breath, keep your back to the wall, and if someone calls your name from the dark, maybe just don't answer. Let's begin. Story 1. She looked out the window when she was told not to. There was a note taped to the window when she arrived, just 3 words scribbled in faded red ink. Do not look. It was room number 3 in an old lodge off Route 58, perched on a wooded ridge in upstate New York. The kind of place that smelled like cedar and mildew, with taxidermy staring from the walls and staff that spoke only when spoken to. Callie checked in late, tired from driving 9 hours straight from Ohio, drained and hollow from a breakup that hadn't ended so much as fizzled out through silence. All she wanted was stillness, solitude, and a few days of not being watched. So when she saw the paper on the window, she assumed it was a prank. Just leftover weirdness from some Halloween promotion or bored teenagers trying to make a ghost story out of a broken view. The window in question overlooked the back of the property, facing dense trees that sloped into a valley of nothing. But the note bothered her. Not because of what it said, but because of how old it looked. The paper had yellowed at the edges. The ink had bled from time and moisture, and the tape holding it up had been replaced more than once. She didn't look that first night. The room was cold and musty, but the bed was surprisingly soft, and exhaustion wrapped around her like a second blanket. She fell asleep thinking about absolutely nothing. The next morning, she asked the woman at the front desk if there was something wrong with room 3. The woman paused, blinked slowly, and said, "That room hasn't had a complaint in a long time." And that was it. No follow-up, no smile. Just that sentence and the same dead-eyed expression. Callie spent the day exploring nearby trails, eating diner food that tasted like the color beige, and trying not to check her ex's social media. But the whole time, the window lingered in her mind. Not the view, not the forest, just that sentence. Do not look. That night, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the sound of crickets outside like static in her brain. The lodge was quiet, almost too quiet. She tried to sleep. She really did. But something about that note felt unfinished, like a sentence whispered and never completed. Around midnight, she got up and walked to the window. The paper was still there. She reached up, touched the edge. It flaked like ash. She peeled it away slowly, careful not to rip the tape. And then she looked. The forest was darker than it should have been. There were no stars, no moonlight, just trees. Tall, wide, and absolutely still. And in that moment, as she stared out into the blackness, she felt it. The sense of being stared back at. Not watched, not observed, but matched. Like there was something out there that had been waiting for her to do exactly this. The window was cold against her palm. She didn't move for a while, didn't breathe too deep. Just stood there, eyes locked on something she couldn't see but somehow knew was real. The next morning, her breakfast came late. The same woman from the desk brought it to her door without being asked. She placed the tray down, looked at Callie, and said, "If you saw it, don't speak of it." Then she walked away. Callie wanted to ask what she meant, but her throat felt dry. Her voice wasn't ready. That day, she tried to leave the lodge. She packed her bag, started her car, but the engine wouldn't turn. The signal on her phone was gone. Even the birds seemed silent now. When she walked back into the lobby to ask for help, the staff were gone. No footsteps, no movement, just the distant creak of floorboards and the hum of a place that wasn't meant to be full. That night, the paper was back on the window. New tape, fresh ink. But this time it said something different. Too late now. She didn't sleep. Her eyes stung from being open too long. The shadows in the room were wrong. They didn't move with the trees. They moved with her. When she turned her head, they leaned. When she blinked, they vanished. By the third day, she no longer remembered what she'd come here for. Her phone was full of photos she hadn't taken. Forests, trees, close-ups of her own face taken from just outside the window. But the angles were wrong. The height didn't match. And in some, her eyes were open in a way that felt borrowed. She tried to email someone, anyone. But the screen blinked back an error. Device not recognized. The lodge didn't exist on the map anymore. Room 3 didn't have a number on the door. And when she checked the guest book, her name wasn't written anywhere. She stood in the middle of the room that night and said her name out loud. Nothing echoed. No one answered. The shadows listened but offered nothing in return. On the morning of the 4th day, a different guest checked into room 3. A man in his 50s with a hiking backpack and a nervous smile. He asked if there were any recommendations for quiet reading spots. The front desk woman smiled for the first time in years. She handed him a key and a brochure. She didn't mention the note on the window. She never did. She knew that those who needed the warning would read it, and those who didn't would look anyway. Sometimes all it takes is a glance, and what you see can't be unseen. That window wasn't just glass, it was an opening. And when you're warned not to look, maybe the danger isn't outside, but in what you're inviting in. So if you're ever standing in front of something covered, something sealed, ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen if I don't look? Speaking of invitations, let me tell you about a man who made a different choice. He picked the one tent no one else wanted, and for that, he got a night he never walked away from.
Story 2. He took the last tent on the ridge. He arrived late, long after most hikers had already set up camp. The trail had been harder than he expected, winding higher than the map suggested, and his legs felt like they were carrying bricks instead of a backpack. His name was Evan, 28, recently divorced, recently unemployed, and recently convinced that going off-grid for a weekend would make everything quiet down inside his head. The ridge was beautiful, to be fair.
Sunlight cut through pines at just the right angle, and the silence up there wasn't heavy, it was clean. Peaceful. The campground was full, though. 12 tent plots, and all but one had been claimed. The last tent stood alone at the far edge, facing the slope that dropped into miles of unbroken forest. The other hikers gave him polite nods, but didn't offer much more. No one warned him. No one said a thing. So, he set up his stuff beside the last tent, assuming it belonged to someone who'd gone for a walk or to collect firewood. But when night fell and no one returned, he asked around. Everyone said the same thing. That tent's been empty since yesterday. Someone set it up, but no one ever saw who. Evan shrugged it off. Maybe someone got cold feet and left. Maybe it was a ranger. Either way, it was just a tent. Just canvas and stakes and zippers. But something about it bothered him. It wasn't zipped shut. It wasn't fully open either. The flap hung crooked like someone had left in a hurry but wasn't sure if they were coming back. He didn't sleep well that night. The sounds outside didn't match what he'd heard on other camping trips. There were no owls, no rustling, just wind. Constant wind blowing in circles, whispering through the fabric of the empty tent beside his. Around 3 in the morning, he thought he saw the flap move. Just slightly. Not from the wind, but inward, as if something was pulling it from inside. He sat up, flashlight in hand, but when I aimed the beam, the tent stood still. No one there. Nothing moved. The next morning, he woke up late. The sun was already high, and his firewood was wet, though it hadn't rained. The empty tent looked the same, untouched. Still crooked. Still waiting. That afternoon, he hiked down the lower loop of the ridge, just a few miles to clear his head. When he got back, something felt off. His tent had been unzipped. Nothing stolen, but his sleeping bag was turned over and his boots were wet inside. He asked the others if anyone had seen someone near his tent. They all shook their heads. One guy said you should pick a different spot if you're staying another night. Evan asked why. The guy just said some things are left behind for a reason. That night, the wind was louder. It didn't howl. It spoke. Not in words, but in pulses. Rhythmic flutters against the tent wall, like fingers tapping a message in a code only the trees could understand. At some point, Evan couldn't resist anymore. He got out of his tent and walked over to the empty one. It looked different up close. Not older, but flatter. Like it didn't fully exist in the same way the others did. He reached for the flap. It was cold. Not fabric cold, but the kind of cold that steals breath before a thought. He opened it slowly, holding the flashlight ahead like a weapon. The inside was bigger than it should have been. Much bigger. He stepped inside. His foot didn't touch fabric. It touched soil. Damp, spongy, and warm. He took one more step. The air was thick, buzzing like static, and the flap zipped shut behind him. He turned quickly, but the zipper was gone. No door, just darkness and air that pressed inward like a held breath. He shouted once, maybe twice, but nothing came back. The ground tilted. Not enough to fall, just enough to confuse balance. He ran forward, hoping for a seam, a wall, anything. But the tent stretched with him. It kept going. No echoes, no light. Just footsteps and his own breath getting sharper, faster. Then it stopped. All of it. The space, the movement, even the air. He stood still, listening to nothing, surrounded by nothing. And something touched his shoulder. The next morning, the campers woke up to find the last tent still there, but this time it was zipped shut. No one remembered hearing anything in the night. No one saw Evan leave. His backpack was gone. So were his boots. Only the sleeping bag remained folded too neatly, too carefully. The tent itself looked cleaner, straighter, as if it had just been set up again. A few campers asked around, but no one had seen anything. When a ranger came to check, he said the same thing they always say. Sometimes people leave early. Sometimes people take different trails down. But deep down, everyone knew Evan never made it down the ridge. His name wasn't on the logbook anymore. His car was still in the lot. But the tent stayed. Still on the edge. Still zipped shut. Still waiting. Some places are empty for a reason, and if everyone's avoiding something, it's probably not paranoia, it's history. That last tent on the ridge should have stayed untouched. But what about something that seems even smaller? Just a reel of old film. Just a harmless little playback. Until each rewind takes something from you. Memory identity control. The next story is about a girl who didn't break the film, just the boundary between observer and observed. Story 3. She rewound the found footage. One too many times. She found the reel in a cardboard box labeled AV Storage, 1986. It was buried behind the film lab, tucked under a broken shelf full of dusty camcorder parts and rolls of exposed negatives no one had cataloged in decades. The university was remodeling the old media wing, and as a junior film student with an internship in the archive department, Kayla had access to everything no one else cared about. She wasn't supposed to take anything home, but something about that unlabeled 8-minute reel made her fingers close around it before she even realized. It felt warm. Not hot, not strange, just familiar. Like it belonged to her, even though she'd never seen it before. That night, she borrowed her roommate's projector and set it up in the dorm lounge. The film started with static, then a slow pan across what looked like a wooded trail. No sound, just flickering grain and uneven light. Then a figure appeared, a girl walking away from the camera. She had dark hair, wore a red coat, and her steps were too slow, like the film was stuck or skipping. Kayla rewound and watched again. Same trail, same coat. But on the second viewing, the girl turned slightly. Not toward the camera, but almost. Her face wasn't visible, but something in her posture shifted. Kayla leaned closer, rewound again. On the third playback, the girl paused. The trees swayed, the shadows on the ground bent. She watched the full reel. Nothing else happened. But something felt off. She turned off the projector, rolled up the film, and went to bed. At 3:24 a.m., her phone buzzed. No message, just a vibration. She checked the time, then the projector, which she had left unplugged. It was humming. Light spilled faintly from the lens cap. She unplugged it again. The hum stopped. The next day, she watched the reel again. On the fifth playback, the girl in the red coat lifted her head. Kayla paused it, rewound, watched again. This time, the girl's hand moved slightly, brushing against a tree. Kayla didn't remember seeing that motion before. She watched it 6 more times. Each time something changed. A new branch, a wider path, a slower blink. On the 10th viewing, the girl turned her full face toward the camera. Kayla froze. The face was blurry, but something about the expression made her heart skip. It looked like her. Not exactly, but close. Same cheekbones, same jawline. She rewound again. On the 12th playback, the girl mouthed something. 2 syllables. Could have been hello. Could have been help. Could have been her name. Kayla turned off the projector. Her chest felt tight. Her ears buzzed with pressure. She checked the reel for edits or cuts. There were none. One continuous piece. When she rolled it up, her fingers were trembling. That night, she dreamed of woods. The same trees. The same trail. But this time, she was holding the camera, and the girl in red was walking ahead, glancing back, waiting. She woke up with dirt under her nails. On the 3rd day, she tried to report the reel to the archive supervisor, but the box was gone. The shelf was gone. When she asked around, no one remembered any AV storage labeled 1986. She asked the renovation team, and they told her the wing had been sealed since before she was born. That night, the projector turned on by itself. The film had been threaded. She hadn't done it. She watched it one last time. This time, the girl didn't appear at all. Instead, the trail led straight into darkness. The trees looked wrong, warped, like they'd been drawn instead of filmed. Kayla stared at the screen until her eyes burned. She reached for the power cord, but before she pulled it, the reel spun backward on its own. Fast. Too fast. The screen flashed. For a fraction of a second, she saw her own dorm room. Herself. Sitting exactly where she sat now, watching the screen. But the version of her on the reel wasn't moving. Just staring. The film stopped. Burned at the edge. She touched the reel. It was cold. The room smelled like wet leaves. She unplugged the projector. Left the reel in its box. The next morning, she couldn't find it. Gone, as if it had never existed. Her roommate hadn't seen it. The front desk hadn't seen her bring it in. The media wing was closed off completely. No one remembered her access code. She tried to describe what she had seen to a professor, but the words didn't come out right. That night, she noticed something on her phone. A new video. No title. No timestamp. She opened it. It was the same footage. The trail, the woods, and her. Not the girl in red, just her. Walking away, slowly, out of frame. The next day, she didn't show up to class. Her dorm room was locked from the inside. No one could reach her. Campus police eventually opened it, but the room was empty. Projector gone. Phone gone. The only thing left was a single frame of film burned at the edges sitting on the desk. It showed a trail in the woods. No people. No movement. Just the faint blur of something red fading into the trees. You know what they say, if you stare at something long enough, eventually it stares back. And in this case, the reel didn't just record the past, it created it. So what about the kind of mistake that happens in real time? A wrong address, a mislabeled door, a delivery made to a place that doesn't exist. But once you walk through the wrong doorway, it doesn't matter where you came from, only that you're part of it now. Story 4. He walked into the wrong door in the apartment complex. Darren had been delivering food part-time for the past 7 months, mostly to pay off student loans and avoid moving back in with his parents. He knew every apartment complex in the downtown loop, from the luxury condos to the concrete relics built in the 60s. He preferred the older buildings, honestly. No gated parking, no concierge, no awkward small talk. Just buzz in, drop the bag, move on. One Friday night just past 10, he picked up an order for a place called Crestwood Plaza. He'd been there twice before, a squat 4-story block with identical beige doors and flickering hallway lights. The order was for Unit 405B, name listed as Keller. Nothing strange. He parked, rode the elevator to the 4th floor, and walked the hall until he reached the end. But there was no 405B, just 405. He double-checked the app. 405B clearly listed. He stood there for a moment, confused, until he noticed something. There was a second door next to 405, slightly recessed in the wall, almost like it had been added as an afterthought. No number on it. Just a dark peephole and a tarnished knob. The kind of door you pass without noticing. He hesitated, then knocked. No answer. He tried again. The hallway buzzed with old fluorescent light. He turned to leave, but his phone vibrated. A new message from the customer. Just leave it inside. Doors open. He checked again. The knob turned. The door creaked inward. No voice, no movement, but the room inside looked normal. Carpet, couch, a small table, dim lamp, no TV. He stepped in, set the bag down on the table, and turned to go, but the door was gone. Not closed, not slammed, just gone. Behind him only a wall, seamless, beige, blank. He stared, heart-hammering, reached out, touched drywall, turned back. The apartment looked different now. The couch had moved, the lamp was off, and there was something on the wall, a photo of him, standing in this exact room, wearing the exact clothes, but looking older, tired, unblinking. He stumbled backward, reached for his phone. No signal. The screen flickered, then died. He moved to the window, hoping to yell for help, but there was no city outside, no buildings, no lights, just darkness, not black sky, just nothing. He shouted, no echo, no answer. He walked through the apartment. Every door led back to the same room. No kitchen, no bathroom, just variations of the same space. Different photos, some of them, some of others, all standing alone, all with the same blank expression. He lost track of time. The light never changed. No hunger, no thirst, just silence. Once he tried to sleep on the couch. When he woke up, he was sitting at the table again. The food bag was still there, cold, unopened. The receipt had changed. Now it read, delivered to 405B. Stay. He tried to scream again. Nothing came out. One day, if days even passed, a knock came at the wall. Not the door, the wall. And then a voice, muffled. A delivery driver, female, asking for 405B. He ran to the sound, pounded on the wall, shouted. But she never responded. Just footsteps. Fading. Silence. The wall stayed solid. He wept then, not from fear, but from understanding. He was the next photo now, the next file, the next layer. The apartment had taken others, and it would take more. Somewhere outside the building still stood. Tenants came and went. Packages arrived. But 405B wasn't on the lease records. Never had been. If you asked the property manager, she'd tell you there was no such unit. And maybe she's right. Maybe it only appears for those passing by, tired, distracted, not asking questions. Maybe all it takes is one knock, one step in, one door you weren't meant to touch. And if you ever find yourself in a hallway like that, holding a bag of food for someone you'll never meet, remember this. Check the door, read the number, and if it says 405B, walk away. Some doors don't open to rooms. They open to repetitions, loops, places that remember you long after you've forgotten them. So let me ask, if a stranger said your name out loud before you said anything, would you still get in the car? The next story begins with a girl who did. She just wanted a ride. What she got was a one-way trip into nowhere. Story 5. She accepted the wrong ride at the station. The train had been delayed for almost 2 hours, and by the time Layla stepped onto the platform, it was well past midnight. The station was nearly empty. A few stragglers lingered near the vending machines, their faces lit by the flicker of failing fluorescent lights. The air was cold, in a way that crept through sleeves and settled in her spine. She pulled her coat tighter, phone in hand already open in her rideshare app. She didn't recognize the city well. She was only passing through on her way to visit an old friend in Baltimore, and the layover here had not been part of the plan. The station was small, poorly lit, and clearly past its prime. She didn't want to wait any longer than necessary. As she tapped her screen, she heard it. A car horn. 2 quick chirps. She looked up and saw a black sedan idling just past the drop-off lane. The headlights were dim, one flickering slightly. The windows were tinted, the rear passenger door already open. A man leaned out the driver's side window and said her name. Not loud, just calm, confident. Layla froze. She hadn't even confirmed her ride yet. She checked the app. No driver assigned, no car matched. But he said her name. She assumed maybe her friend had booked it for her. Maybe she was just tired. It was cold. It was late. She got in. The door closed without a sound. The car smelled like eucalyptus and something faintly metallic. The driver didn't speak, just started driving. The streetlights blurred past the city, thinning into quiet highways. Layla glanced at her phone. No signal. No updates. The app still showed loading. She asked where they were headed. No answer. The driver didn't turn, didn't nod, just drove. She leaned forward slightly, but there was a divider. Not plastic, not glass, just shadow. Like the space between the seats didn't want to be seen. She sat back. The car didn't take any turns. It didn't stop for lights. The road seemed empty. Too empty. No signs. No other cars. She started to panic, opened the app again. Still loading. She tried to open the door. Locked. She pressed her face to the window. The outside looked wrong. Not dark, just blank. like driving through a tunnel made of silence. She looked at the driver again. His hands were steady, but the rearview mirror showed no reflection, no eyes, no outline, just the back seat. She whispered his name, the one he had spoken to her, but he didn't flinch. The car began to slow, not abruptly, just gradually, as if the road itself was ending. She saw a gas station up ahead, lights on, neon flickering, a figure standing outside smoking. She banged on the window, waved, but the station passed by like a memory, untouched, unreachable. The car picked up speed again. She checked the time. It hadn't changed since she boarded. Still 12:08. Her phone battery dropped from 60 to 0 in one blink. She dropped it, breathed deep, tried to calm herself. She asked him again, louder this time. "Who are you? Where are we going?" But her voice sounded wrong in the cabin, like it echoed in reverse. The driver finally turned his head, not fully, just enough for her to see one eye. It was hollow, not dark, hollow. Then he smiled, not with his mouth, with the rearview mirror. The car slowed again. This time it stopped. She looked outside. A field, no road, just tall grass. The door opened, no sound, no breeze, just air that felt heavier than it should. He spoke just once. "You're here." She didn't move, couldn't. Something pulled, not her arms, not her legs, just her. Pulled toward the dark. She stepped out, not willingly, but not against her will either. Just moved. As if finishing a thought someone else had started, the car vanished behind her. No engine, no tires, just gone. She turned around. Only field, no path, no light. She walked. There was nothing else to do. In the morning station, security found her bag still sitting where she had been waiting. The app showed no completed ride. Her location history ended at 12:08. Her name never pinged again. Weeks later, a man in Tennessee claimed to see her walking along a deserted road. She didn't respond to his calls. She just walked past, eyes forward, hands empty. He said she looked at peace, like someone who had finally gotten to where she was going. But her family knows that's not true, because Layla never had a destination. She was just trying to get through the night. A name isn't just a name. Sometimes it's an agreement. And when someone uses yours without permission, what they're really doing is reaching in. But not every trap calls your name. Some are quieter, softer. They flicker. They glow. They wait for you to step forward and say, "I'll light the rest." The next story is about a candle that should have stayed dying and what happened when someone gave it one more breath. Story 6. He lit the candle that was already flickering. The church had been closed for almost 40 years. Not condemned, not boarded up, just closed. Left alone like something the town didn't want to remember, but couldn't bring itself to destroy. It sat on a hill just beyond the river, its steeple cracked, its stained glass windows dimmed by time and dust. People in town said it wasn't haunted, not exactly. But strange things happened to those who went inside. Lights flickered in homes nearby. Dogs howled at odd hours. And once, just once, a boy went missing after being dared to spend the night there. He came back the next day, but never spoke again. Caleb knew all that. He'd heard the stories, but stories never impressed him. He wasn't reckless, just curious. And when he saw the door slightly ajar during one of his walks, he told himself it was just wind. Just time. Just gravity. He stepped inside, careful with each footfall. The air smelled like wood rot and melted wax. The pews were still in place, if a bit crooked. The altar had crumbled on one side. But at the far end of the sanctuary past the pulpit was a small table. On it, a single candle flickered. Not lit, but glowing. Just barely. as if it had been burning for days or had never really gone out. Caleb approached slowly. The candle was set in an old brass holder covered in dust, yet the flame was steady. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out his lighter, and without thinking, he lit it. It flared. Not violently, not loud, but bright. Too bright for a moment. Then it settled, and something changed. The air shifted. The sound in the room flattened. It felt like being underwater, like time had taken a deep breath and was holding it. He stepped back. The flame didn't flicker anymore. It burned perfectly still, like a photo of fire, rather than fire itself. He turned to leave, but the door wasn't where it had been. The back of the church had lengthened. The walls stretched farther, the exit further than it should have been. He walked slowly, trying not to panic. His footsteps didn't echo. They didn't make sound at all. When he looked back, the candlelight was still there, but dimmer now, and another candle had appeared beside it, this one unlit. He looked around, heart racing. The pews were different now, fewer, longer. Shadows clung to the edges of the room, unmoving. He pulled out his phone. No signal, no time. The screen wouldn't turn on. He tried the door again, still too far. The ceiling creaked, not like weight, more like breathing. The air grew warmer, not hot, thick, like something had settled just above him. He looked at the candle again. Now there were 3, 1 still burning, 2 unlit. He took a step toward them. The flame responded, growing taller. He froze. The walls closed in slightly. He could feel it, not visibly, just feel it. The pressure, the stare. He whispered, though he didn't know why. He said his name. Nothing answered, but the flame flickered just once. He turned around again. There were no windows. He hadn't noticed before, but there were no longer any windows at all. The stained glass was gone. Just walls, smooth, seamless. The light in the room now came only from the candles. 4 now, 3 dark, 1 lit. He ran, full sprint, toward the door, but every step felt like sinking. The floor didn't move, but it absorbed him, slowed him, softened him. He reached the back of the church, touched the handle, pulled. It didn't move. It wasn't locked. It just wasn't a door anymore. He turned around. The altar was gone. In its place, a circle of candles, dozens, hundreds, all flickering, all identical. He stepped forward. He didn't want to, but he did. The flames brightened, then dimmed, then one by one began to go out, slowly, not randomly, like counting. He shouted, tried to stamp them out, but his feet passed through them like smoke. They weren't heat, they were memory, and each one that vanished took something with it. His birthday, his favorite color, the name of the street he grew up on. He fell to his knees, begged, whispered, prayed, then silence. No candles, no flame, just dark. When he woke up, he was outside. Daylight, birds. His hands were covered in wax. His phone lay beside him, screen cracked. He walked home, or tried to, but something felt wrong. His mother didn't recognize him. His friends called him the wrong name. His own voice sounded strange in his throat. He checked online. His email didn't exist. His school records were gone. In photos, he looked slightly off. Not enough to alarm, just enough to feel wrong. That night, he dreamed of the church, but now he was watching from above. Inside, another candle burned, flickering, waiting, and a new hand reached forward, lighter in hand, ready, somewhere the church still sits on its hill. Quiet, waiting. The door opens just wide enough. And if you step inside and see a candle already glowing, remember this. You didn't light it. but someone did, and they never really left. Not all light brings clarity. Some light burns memory, rearranges reality, and trades you for the next match. That church still waits, but so do other places. Less sacred, more familiar. Like a house with the front door cracked just enough to make you ask, should I check? The next story is about someone who answered that question with kindness. And kindness without caution led her somewhere she could never quite leave. Story 7. She entered the house with the open door just to help. It was just past 3 in the morning when Eliza turned onto Sycamore Lane. The street was quiet, lit only by the dim orange glow of aging street lamps. She wasn't supposed to be out this late, not really, but her shift at the clinic had run long and she didn't want to take the freeway. The houses on this street all looked the same. 2 stories, beige, side-and-trimmed hedges. Comfortable lived in. Safe. She noticed the door before she noticed the house. It was open. Not wide, but enough. Enough to see the black beyond it. No porch light, no movement, just the front door cracked open like an unfinished sentence. She slowed her car. Her instinct said to keep driving. But another part of her, the part that had become a nurse in the first place, said, what if someone needs help? Maybe someone fell. Maybe it's a break-in. Maybe they just forgot. She parked, left her hazard lights blinking, stepped out into the chilled night air. The house didn't look abandoned. The grass was cut. A newspaper sat on the steps, today's date printed clearly. She called out a soft hello. No answer. Still, something inside her moved. She stepped onto the porch. The air smelled faintly of lavender and something else. Something metallic. She pushed the door gently. It opened with a low creak. She stepped inside. The living room looked normal. Couch, lamp, a photo on the wall of a couple holding hands near a lake, but the lamp wasn't plugged in. The bulb flickered anyway. She took another step. Her shoes didn't echo. The floor felt soft, but not like carpet, like moss. She called out again, louder, still nothing. She stepped farther in. The door closed behind her. She didn't hear it, just felt it. The air changed, heavy now, pressed close around her ribs. She turned toward the hallway. Every door was closed, except one, at the far end. The bedroom, light spilled from under it, soft and golden, like firelight. She moved toward it, slowly. Each step felt longer, each breath quieter. She reached for the doorknob. It was warm, too warm. She opened it. Inside was a room that didn't match the house. Stone walls, no bed, just a mirror. Tall, framed in black, and in it herself, but not. The reflection blinked at a different rhythm, moved half a second off. Eliza stepped closer. Her reflection smiled. She didn't. She stepped back. It didn't. She turned to leave. The door was gone. No door, no frame, just smooth stone. She turned back to the mirror. Now it showed the living room, but not empty. Someone sat on the couch, holding a photo. Her photo, from her graduation. The mirror rippled, then went black. She was alone, but not. Something moved behind her. She spun. Nothing. Just air. Thick, cold, pressed against her skin like breath. She ran toward where the door had been. The wall stretched, warped. The house rearranged itself. Every hallway led to another room. All familiar, all wrong. A kitchen without a stove, a bathroom with no mirrors, a closet filled with coats that didn't fit her but smelled like her childhood home. She screamed. Her voice didn't travel, just dropped to the floor like glass. She found the front door again. It was open. She ran, out into the night, into her car, slammed the door, locked it, looked up, and the house was gone. Not in flames, not in shadows. Gone. Only an empty lot. Weeds, cracked pavement. She blinked, checked her phone, no missed calls, no time. The screen said 3:01, but she had been inside for hours. She drove home in silence. That night she dreamed of the house, not as it was, but as it remembered her. Each time she blinked, the house changed shape, grew a room, lost a door, called her by name. She tried to wake, but her body stayed heavy. When she opened her eyes the next morning, she was not in her bed. She was on a couch, in a living room, with no lamp, holding a photo she didn't remember owning. The walls were beige, the air smelled faintly of lavender and something else, and outside on the porch, the door stood slightly open, waiting for someone kind enough to check inside. You can't help everyone, especially when the place you're walking into seems built to keep people like you. That house knew her name long before she knocked. But what happens when you give your name freely? No doors, no candles, no monsters, just a voice, a simple question, and the worst decision you can make answering it honestly. Our final story is about a man who forgot that some parts of us aren't meant to be handed over, because once your name isn't yours, neither are you. Story 8. He said his real name when the voice asked. Cameron wasn't supposed to go to the Harvest Masquerade. He didn't like crowds, didn't like music, didn't like the way everyone wore masks and pretended to be someone else for a night. But his roommate insisted, said it was tradition, said the whole town came out for it. Cameron had just moved to Granger's Hollow a month before trying to escape a life that didn't feel like his anymore. He figured a small town would be quieter, easier to disappear into, and for the most part it was, until the masquerade. It took place at an old manor on the edge of town, a sprawling estate draped in orange lights and black fabric. Every room glowed like a candle. Costumes ranged from silly to stunning, every face hidden behind painted masks. The rule was simple: no names, no introductions. Speak in gestures and laughter and silence if you had to, but no real names. That was the magic. That was the point. Cameron wore a simple black mask and a dark suit. He stayed on the edges of the party, watching people swirl past him like ghosts. He almost left. Almost. Until someone tapped his shoulder. A woman in a crimson gown and a silver mask. Her voice was soft, barely a whisper. She said, "Tell me something true." He laughed, unsure what she meant, but she didn't move, just waited. So he said his name. Cameron. The word felt too loud in his mouth, too sharp. Her head tilted. She stepped back, smiled without smiling, then vanished into the crowd. He stood there, heart racing, embarrassed, confused. But the party moved on. The music kept playing. No one else reacted. Except now, people started calling him by name. He never told them, never introduced himself. But they said it anyway, with knowing eyes, with perfect pronunciation, as if they'd always known. He left early, walked back through dark streets. The air felt thicker, the shadows closer. At home, he took off the mask, but his reflection didn't feel right. His eyes looked too wide, his smile too slow. He went to bed, told himself it was just a weird night, just nerves. But in the morning, things were different. His phone wouldn't unlock. Face ID failed. His name wasn't on his voicemail anymore, just static. At the grocery store, the cashier greeted him with a different name. At the library, his card didn't scan. The clerk looked at him and said, "You're not Cameron." At first he thought it was a joke. Then he checked his mail, his ID, his bank app. All wrong. Different name, different birth date. Same photo, same face. He went back to the manor that afternoon. It was gone. Just a field, no lights, no structure. The land looked untouched, wild. He asked locals. They laughed, said there was no party, no masquerade, not in years. One old man said if you give your name on the wrong night, the hollow keeps it. That evening, Cameron tried to call his parents. The number was disconnected. He found photos on his phone of events he didn't attend, places he hadn't been, but he was in them, smiling, arm around people he didn't recognize. One photo was of the party. He stood in the center, no mask, staring at the camera. Behind him, everyone else was blurred, faceless. That night, he dreamed of the ballroom, but it was empty now, just him, and a voice from nowhere asking again, "What is your name?" He couldn't answer, couldn't remember. He said Cameron, but the room laughed. A dry, cold sound. The mirrors cracked. He woke up with a nosebleed. The next day, no one spoke to him. Not neighbors, not clerks. People looked past him like he wasn't there. He screamed his name on the sidewalk. A passing woman looked at him and said, "That's not yours anymore." That night he stood in front of the mirror, practiced saying his name, over and over, but it felt thinner each time, less real. He looked into his own eyes and saw someone else blinking back a second too late. The next morning, he was gone. The landlord said the apartment was empty, bed unslept, fridge full, but no trace of him, just a black mask on the table, and a note written in shaky pen. It read, "I gave it away. I shouldn't have. If you go to the masquerade, don't answer when they ask. And whatever you do, never say your name out loud. So now you know. 8 stories, 8 people, 8 chances to stop, and they didn't. You've heard it all unfold, and maybe somewhere along the way you thought I wouldn't have done that. I would have walked away. I would have kept the door closed. I wouldn't have looked back. But the truth is, most people don't recognize the moment they're crossing the line. That's the trap. It always feels harmless, normal, logical until it isn't. And then it's too late. The candle's already burning. The door's already shut. The name's already been spoken. These stories aren't just here to scare you. They're here to whisper something quieter, something slower, that choices matter. That caution is a kind of strength. That sometimes the safest thing you can do is nothing at all. So if you're still here with me, thank you for listening, for remembering, for staying curious but careful. If one of tonight's stories stayed with you, I hope you carry it for a little while longer, not as fear but as armor. And if you ever feel that pause, that gut feeling just before the decision, listen to it. It might just be the thing that keeps your story from ending like the ones you heard tonight. Until next time, sleep light, choose wisely, and remember, not every voice that calls your name deserves an answer.